This saw is $900. This saw is $300. Is this one actually worth $600 more? Let me know in the comments. We're fixing to find out. Just so you know, this video is not sponsored. I purchased both of these myself, both the DeWalt and the SawStop, as well as the SawStop brake. We're gonna trip with a sweet tater. Let's do it. I'll go over the similarities of each of these saws as well as the differences, and then we're gonna start cutting some wood, and I'll tell you how each one of them perform on each test. Let's get it. First and foremost, this is a 10-inch saw. This is an 8 1/4 saw, so you're gonna give up some of the capacity of the cutting on this saw to save that money. The max cut depth on this SawStop is 3 1/8 inches, while the max cut depth on the DeWalt is 2.5 inches. So there's obviously some trade-off there for that price. And of course, at 45 degrees, you're gonna give up some more cut depth because you can get 2 1/8 out of the SawStop, where the DeWalt is only gonna be 1 3/4 inches. Now, for the money, both of these saws come with a 15-amp direct drive motor. However, the DeWalt spins at 5,800 RPMs, where the SawStop only spins at 4,000 RPMs. But this has a 10-inch blade, whereas the DeWalt has an 8 1/4 blade, and that's where you're giving up some of that trade-off for the money. Now, both have the same rip capacity at 24.5 inches on the fence, so you're not losing anything there. And the fence will move to the left side of the blade on both of these, giving you approximately 13 inches of rip to the left. And both of these fences are rack and pinion, meaning they're gear driven. They're virtually identical as far as the gear driven system, but the way they operate is a little different. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And both fences have a high-low feature, meaning you can flip this over on both of these, and that provides a work support if you max it out at, you know, the 24.5 inches on both of them. It'll give you a little extra support out there on the edge. Or if you're cutting thin stock, the fence will raise up just a little bit on that high-low and give you a lower working surface if you're cutting thin stock. It's very useful. So the weight of these two are quite a bit of difference, and you can absolutely feel it when you pick it up. This one on the right, the SawStop, is 68 pounds, where this one is only 53.4. So there's quite a bit of heft difference on the SawStop. So what that means for you is if you're transporting these from job site to job site or taking them out of the shed or garage and working in your driveway, the DeWalt will be much easier to move around. However, the SawStop is more substantial, so it doesn't move around as much if you're using it on top of a workbench or something like that. One great thing about both of these saws is they have a standard T-slot, which means you can use most standard equipment like this Inker miter gauge, and I much prefer the Inker brand because the little cheap miter gauges that come with these saws are hot garbage. Both of them. You can throw them in the trash, they're just no good. Pick up the Inker, that's the one I would recommend. Now you can get optional stands with both of these saws, which I don't have. One extremely interesting fact that I did not know until I started researching, this DeWalt comes with a 3-year limited warranty. The SawStop is only 1 year. For $900, you're getting a year warranty. For $300, you're getting a 3-year warranty. That doesn't make sense to me. Now, both of these saws are adjustable as far as cutting angles from 0, actually -2, up to 47 degrees, but they both have hard stops at 0 and 45. Now, one thing that the SawStop does have is a micro adjust feature. When you turn the outer part of this knob, you can really dial in some exact angles, and I like that feature on the SawStop. The DeWalt doesn't have that, so getting that exact right angle may be a little more challenging, but not a deal breaker. Now, where the fences differ on each of these saws, the DeWalt actually slides along almost like a T-track design, basically runs on a track the entire length of the fence. I really prefer the DeWalt fence. The SawStop runs on, basically there's a short track in the middle, and then there's cams on each corner, and those cams are adjustable, as we found out in the previous review, so that it takes all the slop out of the fence if it's loose as far as vertical play. Now, the DeWalt adjusts differently. There's a bolt underneath that tightens everything up, but from my experience, when out of the box, there's a tiny bit of play, vertical play in the fence, but I much prefer the rail system to the cam system, mainly because the DeWalt just flows easier. You can literally take one finger and move that fence, where this SawStop, when I adjusted it to tighten it up to remove the slop, it made the fence fairly tight. They both work extremely well. They're both extremely accurate. It's just a preference. One thing I really like about the SawStop is their onboard storage is all in one place, where the DeWalt has it kind of scattered around. One feature that DeWalt touts is a power loss reset. In other words, if you lose power during cutting and power is restored, you have to push the off switch and then on switch again to restore power to make it actually run again. I'm not sure if the SawStop has that, and I'm going to test that now. DeWalt first. Now I'm just going to plug it back in and see what happens. Nothing. You have to turn it off, then back on. I like that, because you never know on a job site if it trips a breaker or just loses power or whatever. You don't want that coming back on and injuring someone. Does the SawStop do the same thing? It does. It does. I like it. You need to see the warning lights here flashing onto the SawStop. Pass the test. One thing that the DeWalt has that the SawStop doesn't is a blade break. In other words, when you hit the power button to turn it off, the blade stops much faster on the DeWalt versus the SawStop. Check it. Couple of seconds at most. Now on the SawStop, it takes quite a bit to spin down, and we'll time that. As far as the size goes, you're going to give up a little bit of size on the tabletop on this DeWalt. You can see here that it's about, I don't know, 1/4 inch shorter than this saw. In other words, less wide. And then as far as deep goes, I've got them lined up on the back side. If you come to the front, you're looking at about 1.5 inches or 2 inches of tabletop space that you're going to be giving up on the smaller saw. The SawStop is also about 1.25 inches taller than the DeWalt. Both saws have non-slip rubber feet on the bottom. It also helps absorb some shock or vibration. Both saws can be locked out. In other words, you can turn the off switch here and put a lock in there, and that prevents it from being turned on, even if it's plugged in. This switch won't work if that switch is off. But on the DeWalt, you can flip this down, put a lock through there, and that will prevent the power switch from being pressed on. You can also store fences on each one underneath so that during transport they don't get damaged. On the SawStop and the DeWalt, both are exactly the same. And of course the blade size on the DeWalt, that 10 inch, it does make a big difference when you're cutting thicker materials, but for most things in the shop, smaller items less than 2 inches thick, the DeWalt's perfectly fine. Also, one thing to note, neither one of these saws can take a dado stack. That's important to a lot of people. For the sake of time, the videos of me cutting the wood are sped up on this video. However, I'm gonna put a link in the description below to a full, unedited, only the cuts version, so you're only just gonna see the cuts on each saw with no talking, and just you can hear the sound at full sound as well as see it at regular speed, so you'll understand more about the cutting power on each saw, on each species of wood. Cutting 90 degrees on a 2x6 standard common pine 2x6 with this DeWalt, like butter. It went right through that thing. No trouble at all, which I expected. It was struggling to get through that 2x6. It really was. I think it's the blade. It's a terrible blade, but it is the one they sent with it. It did make a clean cut, so there's no burning or anything like that. Nice clean cut, but it was bogging down a little bit. The DeWalt never bogged on that, so you'll be able to see that in the unedited version if you want to go check that out. Next, I moved the blade to a 45-degree angle to see if it would actually work on a 45, cut all the way through that 2x6, and as you can see, it cut all the way through with room to spare. So if you're just working with 2x lumber, you're going to be perfectly fine with 8 1/4. Now, will you miss the 10-inch blade at some point in your life? Probably, but for the most part, most smaller projects or a small shop, this is going to be just right. Cutting at 45 on a 2x6 or a piece of 2x material anyway, it cut through it. It was still the same amount of, I'm almost cautious to call it bogging down, but you can feel that the saw has a load on it and when it's cutting through that. But it made a clean cut, no issues there, other than just, it has a perception of being underpowered, although there's no real world evidence of it on the cut. Next, I wanted to know if it'll cut through this hunk of walnut. This walnut's almost 2 inches thick, just shy of 2 inches, and I still had plenty of blade left when I started cutting through it. Sliced right through it, no trouble at all. So I really like this blade. It's not causing any burning, it's not bogging. It done well. It done well on this hunk of walnut. And this saw is a little bit taller than the DeWalt, so I'm having to reach up over it a little more to get that downward pressure, so it kind of probably looks a little awkward, but it doesn't feel awkward. It almost felt like it cut through that better than the 2x6 for some reason. Didn't burn, it made a good clean cut, and it powered right through it, so no issues there. Again, it does feel less powerful than the DeWalt, but the DeWalt isn't spinning as big of a blade and it's spinning at a higher RPM, so that may be it. Now it's time for a piece of hard maple, and while this is only about 1 inch thick, it still did exactly what I wanted to do. And mainly what I was looking for was burning, because it's notorious to burn with certain blade types, but this blade did well with it. Cut through it, no issues at all. Didn't bog or anything like that. I didn't really like that hard maple as much. I can feel it bogging pretty good, and I got a little bit of burning right here at the front of the cut. It may have been the speed at which it was going in, but it did burn it slightly. Again, I think that's the blade, not really the saw's fault. This blade is trash. It's just a terrible blade to put with the saw. I appreciate that they sent a nice blade with this saw. We're fixing to cut through some plywood, but for the most part, this is a really good blade. Most saws, even that very expensive full-size SawStop, did not come with a very good blade at all. This is a nice blade. And that's good because this is kind of a proprietary size at 8 1/4 inches. But this blade will work for most things, I think. Now you better know I love you. Because I'm gonna cut my plywood. Plywood ain't cheap. And so I'm gonna rip some plywood here just to see how this performs. Mainly what I'm looking for is tear out. One of the drawbacks to this saw is that there's not a zero clearance included with it, where the SawStop job site saw does have a zero clearance that comes with it. There may be or may not be a zero clearance aftermarket throat plates for this saw. If there is, I would recommend picking one up. Now I've got the fence all the way out to 24.5. It's actually 25. The specs claim 24.5, but you can get 25 out of it. I've also got the work support folded down. Cut through plywood, no issues. You saw me start, then stop. What happened was this fence sets on posts and you have to move it out to the outer post so that you can get that max cut. And when I put this on, I didn't double check on the back side that it was on the post, and it wasn't, it was off. So my cut started out pretty crooked. So that cut started out crooked and I saw it moving away from the fence. I was like, man, something's not right. So I stopped, and sure enough, I had messed up. As far as cut quality goes on plywood with that blade, it is not terrible. There is a little bit of tear out, but you don't have a zero clearance plate, but the stock blade did a really good job. I don't think the SawStop's gonna do as good a job on plywood. Matter of fact, I cut plywood with that blade when I first got it, and it has tear out, so we'll see how it performs, but plywood, good. This is one of the things I was mentioning before on the SawStop fence versus the DeWalt. The SawStop is much stiffer because you have to adjust those cams to get everything tight, and it just makes it a little stiffer to get everything pushed all the way out or just adjusting. So it's just a minor annoyance to me. Cutting a sheet of plywood, ripping it down at this full length. Actually, it's one post in, so just because I wanted to get a good cut on the plywood. It has about the same amount of tear out as the DeWalt, so it's actually kind of surprising on this piece anyway. And on this side also, it's about the same. It's kind of frayed. You are going to cross the grain on the plywood, so it's going to get you a little more tear out too, but that blade performed pretty well, pretty good on the plywood. Not 100% certain why someone wanted to see plywood cut at 45 degrees on these saws, but you're getting it. So this is what happens. It cut right through it, check it. I mean, there's no issues there. Nice smooth cut, no burning, and no bogging. It did a very good job. This is 3/4 inch sanded birch plywood that you can buy at most local home stores. Just common good plywood. Not Baltic birch, but regular birch. Baltic birch has more layers.
Layers!
Layers.
Layers.
Cutting that plywood, that double layer of plywood at 45 degrees, there's no issues there, there's no burning, it's a good clean cut. It cut through it fairly smoothly. I think it's the RPM difference. This is spinning at 4,000, the DeWalt is at 5,800, and I think you can really tell that difference when you're cutting as far as how fast it feels like it's cutting. It still has the power there, it just feels slower. As far as dust collection goes, after all of those cuts, you can see this is the Outlaw Special dust collection adapter to the Festool hose. But there's a little bit of dust underneath, very little on top, and these black mats, you can see the dust on there a little bit, but it's not terrible. It's better than what I thought. And some of that dust actually came when I forgot to turn the dust hose on one time. So it does pretty good as far as dust collection if you're worried about that. So dust collection on the SawStop with those cuts is fairly similar to the DeWalt. I mean, there's a little bit of dust. I did forget to turn the hose on one more time on this one too. So there's about that same amount of dust on everything versus the DeWalt. And a huge shout out to our YouTube channel members as well as our Patreon subscribers that help us make these videos sponsor free. I'm able to buy sweet taters. I'm able to buy brakes and saws and all these tools that you see so that there's no sponsor influence on them. Thank you very much. If you're interested in becoming one of those, there's links in the description below. Tell you about both of them. We compared all the features, we cut all different types of wood, and now do you think this is actually worth $600 more than this? I'll tell you what I think, yes and no. And the only reason I say yes is because of this one feature. The reason you're buying a SawStop is the flesh sensing technology. In other words, when you touch that blade, you'll notice the light is flashing red. It'll go off, but as soon as I touch that blade, you'll notice that it starts flashing. So that's it. It hit right there. It's just a tiny little nick there on a sweet potato. So, and you see now I'm out of brake. So I got to buy another brake. Well, we now know that a sweet tater will activate a brake and it works extremely fast. But that's just one of those things that, is it worth 600 bucks? If that hit your finger, absolutely. If it doesn't, then it's like buying insurance. You hope you never need it, but when you need it, you're glad you got it. How much are your fingers worth? That's a huge question to ask, and it's one of those things that may or may not happen to you, but a large number of people actually have accidents on table saws, and that $600 is minimal compared to if you have an accident and then have to go to the ER and all the medical bills and all that stuff. Now, whether that feature alone is worth it to you to pay for is completely subjective and up to you. I personally think this is a better saw all the way around as far as power, and the features are almost identical. I like the brake on this one. Really, the only thing I like about this saw more than this is the quick adjust, micro adjust bevel and the safety feature. Everything else is really either equal or this is better than. I think this is, the higher RPMs really makes a big difference as far as how fast you're cutting stuff. You can really tell the difference. If neither one of these are your cup of tea, check out the Skill table saw that I reviewed right there. Click in the box, get you the big old virtual fist bump. That is an excellent beginner saw. And if you want to know why I did not use this plastic push stick that come with this saw, I think they're dangerous. Check out that video and I'll tell you why.